mystery. And that's just how I'm going to pull it off. All right. Welcome to the big story. I'm Alex Morrissey, and today we have Ron Salas with us. Welcome, Ron. Pleasure to meet you. I'm liking the artwork on the wall behind you. This is exciting. So,
yeah.
So I'm probably the world's worst studio decorator. I would say I got to be in the highest percentile for studio designing, like making a really good working studio, but decorating, never been my forte when it comes to studios. So where are you joining us from?
Glen Ellen, Virginia, which is a little ways off, a little bit off Richmond.
Yeah, awesome. Richmond's kind of a hopping place.
Yeah, it's good for food. A lot of good food here in Virginia. So
I remember when we moved from New York to my wife and I moved from New York to Asheville, North Carolina, where we live now. We met some people who were from Richmond, and they were like, the food's really good there. Yeah. And this is like 10 plus years ago. And I was like, really? So, and then, but like ever since then, like I just keep hearing like the food's really good. So we had a great surprise. We had a really good surprise when we traveled up to Portland, Maine, not Portland, Oregon, but Portland, Maine. And that food is ridiculously good up there.
Is it?
Yeah. Like we went to this, I'm just going to say it's a Chinese restaurant, but like the food was made with all local ingredients.
Oh.
So it wasn't like this straight up, like what we all expect as far as the same exact flavors and tastes from, the industrialized, food network out there. Like this was like, everything tasted unique and fresh in its own
nice.
Right? And I'm like, oh, that's gotta be like what it tastes like when you actually have the real food.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like our version of that food. I don't know.
Right. That's great. I've never been there, so someday,
I'd highly recommend doing a trip up there because it's really, really quite cool. I mean, the coastline of Maine is just unbelievable. So, but that's why people tune in to this show, is to hear about travel. So, how long have you been in the game of drawing comics?
Not very long. I mean, I look old, really old, but I got into it pretty late. I've only been doing it for about 10 years.
Okay. Boy, you're doing pretty well.
I was in my 30s.
Okay.
When I first drew comics. So.
Well,
my first one was in.
Your first.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, like how, like, because like if you're getting comics in your 30s, that's not the normal course. I mean, it's usually a young person's obsession, kind of just like I've got to do, like, it's like we rarely see like a rock star, happen in their 30s and 40s because it's just sort of this kind of thing that doesn't happen. So, what were you doing before you said like, hey, I'm going to take a crack at this narrative?
Well, I was drawing this whole time. Like I've been into comics, reading comics since I was 5, probably.
Okay.
Reading comics the whole way. But I never really felt like I was good enough to actually do comics.
All right.
But, I kept drawing and, going to conventions, showing people my work, like sketches and whatever. And enough people said, you know what, you should be doing this. You should be sitting behind the table doing this, drawing comics and all that stuff. So eventually I felt like I should do it. If only just so I could say that I did it.
Sure. Yeah. Just cross that minor effort to be able to get into the comic book industry off that list.
Right.
Yeah, it's so when did you start showing? Because it's like we get people on the show here who are making comic books, and some people who are making comic books at like the highest levels, who have been doing it for decades and decades. But like, I hope people who tune in to listen to these conversations recognize, like, maybe there are people who want to get into making comic books, you know,
Mhm.
and like, and when I say it's a young person's game, the reason I say that is that like you have such less of a filter when you're young.
Yeah.
Say like maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should be a little more cautious with my energy in life, or maybe I should. Maybe that accounting pathway is a smart one, you know, like or whatever the
Yeah.
thing is. But like so like to sort of like using that term, like you know that combat term, which is bridging
Mhm.
the gap, you know, like there's the gap between two people is that safety measure, you know, like
Mhm.
that person's hand can't touch my face, so I'm
Right.
safe. But then it's like, but to commit in a fight means you need to bridge the gap.
Right.
and and to get to, when you're creating anything, to put yourself out there
Mhm.
is to bridge that gap. And
Right.
you didn't, you know, you weren't, you know, sort of dumb and young. You know, you were older. You'd already kind of done a few things in life at that point, I
Yeah. I
hope.
was still dumb, but I was just
Okay,
open.
well, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not dumb. I'm absolutely stupid. But the thing is like, so how do you? I mean, you said people said, "Oh, you should be doing this," but you still had to put the book together and
Right.
bring those pages and show them to people, which is a terrifying prospect
Mhm.
for everybody at whatever level it is. So
Right.
very long preamble there, but like, so what was it internally like for you um, to get to that point to say, "Hey, I'm going to show something to somebody"?
Well, because I didn't start off drawing like a major comic like I did like short stories and all of that. I did a short story in a Pop Gun. I did a short story here and there for anthologies.
Yeah,
Um, so I can get in that way, small bits and pieces of it.
yeah,
Um, I think the first, but the thing is, like, I got in by making a commit. Like, I would, 'cause other people. I'm not doing it by myself.
right.
I'm working with other people, whatever, writer, colorist, whatever.
Okay.
So I would go into it making a commitment to work with these other people, and once
Right.
I made the commitment, I'm forced to finish it.
So you kind of utilized an external sort of structure of some sort, deadline, commitment, whatever the thing is,
Right.
to somewhat overcome whatever internal dialogue that might go, maybe you think, you know, because like,
Exactly. Yeah.
because I mean, I'll, you know, I won't throw names out there, but like I know someone who was a phenomenal illustrator,
Hmm.
like brilliant, great illustrator.
But who is that illustrator?
I'm not telling you. But this person stepped out into the real world,
Hmm.
you know, with everything laid out for them. Like really, like the carpet was rolled out. Off you go become, you know, go become a hotshot illustrator. And
Right.
that person never ever did anything
Hmm.
because they were so afraid to sort of put themselves out there and not be the superstar that they were for the previous however many years.
Right.
And it was really confusing because I'm
Hmm.
like, why are you not doing this? Because you're the one who we were all like, oh well, I mean, there wasn't even a question, you're just gonna be fine, you're gonna do your thing. And then
Right.
like years go by and nothing ever happened, and we're like, well what's just
Hmm.
what's happened. So
That is
um,
disappointing. A wasted potential.
it's a
Some.
huge, you know, in so many ways, it's such a waste of potential.
Mhm.
You know, the person's living a wonderful life now and has, you know, but a completely different career and has nothing to do with what they spent a fair chunk of their life trying to, you know, achieve. So,
Mhm.
but that's internal dialogue winning the battle, you know, and that's not an, you know, and I mean, we all lose that battle, you know, from time to time. So like it's the coping mechanisms that we utilize and engage with to achieve those things, because when you're young and you're stupid, you don't need those as much because you're just like, I'm just going to ask her out, and you go run over and ask the girl out, or you go, hey, would you dance with me, you know, and they go, you know, and you know, maybe they say yes, maybe they say no, but the thing is like like as a friend of mine used to always say, like, well, I mean, if you're not, like if you're not going to get shot in the face, then what's there to worry about, right?
Right.
So was that your thing? Was like, okay, well, if I say yes to somebody else, then I'll have to do it.
Exactly, because I would never. My main problem was why I never did comics was, okay, I made a comic, put it out there,
Right.
and I can't look at it ever again because it's a piece of crap, or
Yeah.
it's just something that's totally embarrassing, and I don't want I don't want to be
Sure.
embarrassed, and everybody's going to know how crappy I am. But because I've made this commitment, even
Yeah.
if it is a piece of crap, it still has to be out there. So.
Yeah, and that's it's so funny because when you do your work, I mean, it always ends that all you do is ever look at this is the mistakes.
Mhm.
Um, after you're done, you're like, boy, man, if only I could have like not done that, kind of stuff. Like, it's always tough. So so accept the fact that what you're going to do is going to end up being crappy to you eventually. It's going to be
Yeah.
that's a good mantra. Is that a T-shirt? Would that be a workable T-shirt? It's kind of verbose.
Would that
So
be a workable teacher? I guess so, maybe. Let me see how yeah. I mean, I used to work in t-shirts, so I think that would work. I think you can put
yeah.
that in there.
So where did you grow up?
Two different places. I used to live in the Philippines.
Okay.
I was born in the Philippines. I moved when I was 12 to Canada, Toronto area,
Oh wow.
Toronto, Canada. And I lived there till about 21. And then I moved to the US when I was about 21.
Okay. Wow. Awesome. Well, that's three very different kind of places to to grow in. So did you discover comics in the Philippines?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know, like,
Oh, I know.
you've heard of like Filipino artists or whatever,
Yeah.
but they have a huge background in comics in the Philippines. So I
Yeah.
was reading mostly homegrown Filipino comics. Sometimes I would be able to pick up like an American comic. Usually, because we don't have like comic stores a lot in the Philippines. We were just buying comics off the newsstands, and sometimes they would have reprints of American comics at the newsstand. So I would
Okay.
buy those. Yeah. So I've been reading comics since I was little, um, and that's why I fell in love with it.
And what was it? What was it? For them, like I don't know, like my first comic books were like one of those. I think they were like one of those 3-packs that they would sell in the
Mhm.
States here, which came in a plastic bag, and
Right. You would see them in Kmart, that kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, that kind of stuff. So I remember getting one of those, and like there was a horror comic in there which scared the bejesus out of me. Um, and then there was a silly like kitty comic in there, like with animals, and then there was like an adventure comic of some sort of like some kind, and those they were super excited. I remember. I mean, I kept them for years and years and years. Like I mean, the covers are tattered by the time I think they disappeared, um, but it was the adventure comic that kind of stuck with me. I guess maybe had I don't know whether if I had channeled this scary stuff in the better direction, I would have ended up loving horror better. But like,
Mhm.
was there a certain type of comic that you dug?
I was pretty much into anything I could find. It was mostly the art that I was
Yeah,
into, not so
right.
much the story. Because I pretty much pick up anything that I like. Um, there wasn't like when you're buying comics like that, you can't really have a huge run of anything. So
Yep.
following any kind of particular story is kind of tough because you're getting an issue here, an issue there, and they're not going to connect. So it's kind of tough that way. So it's hard to follow the stories. So I just bought it for the art.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was one of those. I mean, I don't know how many times I would read a comic book before I actually read a comic book.
Right.
It was just always going through and looking at the pictures and finding the story through that fashion before I would sit and like laboriously read through the balloons that were in the way.
Right.
So, so I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think I know any Filipino comic books, so I can't really. But like, were there big titles that were sort of like popular titles in the Philippines?
Yeah, but it's kind of, most of the Filipino comics are anthology series where you have a bunch of different serialized stories in each one, in each issue, and they're pretty generic. Like they have Filipino comics, Tagalog comics, Pinoy comics. They're pretty much generic titles, so it's not like anybody would remember them. I don't even remember what was in them, but a lot of times it would just be an anthology with a bunch of different stories. Some would be like drama related, some would be adventure, any kind of genre that you would have there. And the way it is in the Philippines, a lot of movies were made off of those comics.
Ah,
Yeah, even before things happened here,
yeah.
back there, people adapted comic books into movies pretty often.
Why was not Hollywood paying attention?
I don't,
I mean,
it's kind of weird. I think,
but of course, everybody in comic books has been saying that for the last 40 years. Like,
right.
there are all these great stories.
Hmm. I think the thing here is because the US or the Western market is so saturated by superhero
Yeah.
comics that the hurdle was the special effects. Once you got
Oh,
enough,
oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, outside of the really miraculous, work they did for the Superman film, which really
Mhm.
was mind-blowingly good for at the time, and it still to me still feels really good.
Right.
The those 90s superhero movies and maybe early 2000s, they're so they suffer so much because they couldn't pull off the thing.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so unfortunately we ended up with black leather costumes for superheroes and less than adequate sort of action scenes where we all go like, well, at least the comic books are still good, that kind of
Right.
thing. So and whatever. I mean, I'm sure that sort of exists in every sort of cinema. I mean, car chases didn't really look great in cinema until like somebody figured out how to really adjust cameras onto low onto cars and
Mhm.
chase cars and have a whole booms moving around vehicles. So those
Right.
kinds of things change everything. So
Mhm.
so it's not just comic books. I mean, the car chase movies, didn't come into play until like the late 60s. So
Right.
um, that's cool. So, and how old were you when you moved to Toronto?
I was about 12.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah.
So I've been working on what I call my 12 theory,
Hmm.
which is that when we are 12, like that's when we sort of lock into the things that we're going to love for the rest of our life. So
Hmm.
everything that we've just kind of built up to the age of 12, because it's before puberty hits and your mind goes sideways,
Right.
you like it's like everything locks in for you. So it's the for oldies such as myself, it's like Star Wars and Star Trek and the Micronauts or whatever this stuff was, and then you hit and then after that all bets are off.
Right.
But when so like I still get excited when I hear a Kiss song on the radio because I'm like, I loved Kiss when I was 10. So,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's
No,
like,
I think that's totally valid. Like
yeah.
everything you say checks out because I fell in love with comic books, old movies, pulp novels, and detective novels like Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, and all that stuff when I was 12, and I still continue to this day. So I think that checks out.
Oh man, Chandler is Chandler not one of the best writers?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
He's-
for dialogue, for plot, not so much, but
no, but I
dialogue
mean,
description, yeah.
I should say as a descriptive writer,
Hmm.
his art of writing description is it's some of the best ever in print. Like there was like I'm going to butcher the quote, but there was like his freshly manicured fingernails glisten like ice cubes under the sun.
Right.
And you're like, oh, you know exactly what that looks like. It's just like, all right, that's cool. I'm loving
Right.
it. So
Yeah, there was one story where it's like he's talking about, I don't remember which story it was, but he was talking about like the heat, how hot it was that day. And it's the kind of heat that makes women look at their husbands' necks with, like gonna
yeah,
try to kill him. Yeah. I mean, I totally butchered that, but it's so he describes something like things in such a unique way
yep,
that's very evocative, and you really feel that
yeah.
what he's putting across. So
Oh
I
yeah,
love
no,
Miller.
he's the best. He really is the best in that category. How did you
Right.
I mean, how did you get like hooked into reading like those pulp novels?
I just always liked going to libraries.
Okay.
And then when I moved to Canada, they have a very good public library system. So I would just go in there and browse through the sections. And I saw a collection of books. I think it's A Simple Art of Murder by
Okay.
Chandler. So a bunch of different short stories in there. So I just picked that up and read through it. And it's just the language is it's so good, like it's so snappy, and just the descriptions are so good. So I just fell in love with it.
And I mean, like, was this something that somebody else noticed in you? Like, I mean, because like with artwork, rarely do you hear someone who's like, well, I never showed my artwork to anyone. And then like when the time came, like I showed my fully formed creative self to a publisher, and they hired me, and the rest is history. Like it's usually there's people along the way who encourage, for this kind of stuff. So, like there could have been a librarian who said like, hey, I see that you've checked out these Raymond Chandler books. Like,
Yeah.
have you seen Dashiell Hammett? And that kind of thing. You're like, what's that? And
Yeah.
you're reading that. But like, was there that kind of person for you when it came to the artwork? Like, I mean, were you a kid, or were you just secret?
I'm not sure. I don't haven't really been one person. It's usually there is an online community.
Okay.
Back in the day, there was an online community called Pencil Jack. There's one. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I don't
That's
think I've ever heard of that.
okay. That's a message board that was founded, I think, by Robert Kirkman. But Robert Kirkman, Tony Moore, all of
Okay.
those guys used to come out of that message board. And then there was also a message board called the Drawing Board.
Okay.
And it was used to be Shane Glines, Warner Bros. Animator. It used to be his message board, and then he, let go of it, and somebody else took it over. But a lot of artists posted on that message board, and really good ones like Bruce Timm, Stuart Eminem,
Yeah.
all of those guys would post amazing art on there, and it's just showing my art in those arenas.
Uh-huh.
That where I got the confidence to develop further as an artist.
That's super interesting, because like that didn't exist, when I was young. So I didn't have sort of an outlet. Like the outlet was either people in your house or your friends,
Right.
or people at school, and like that was where you would see things, and like either a family member would say, hey, that's looks pretty good, you should keep trying, or a teacher would be, the art teacher would be like, that's great, now would you work on the actual project in the class?
Right.
So like it's so cool. I mean, I can't put myself in the mindset. Like I mean, I remember being on like AOL or Yahoo message board things back in the 90s, but like I really would love to see like what would have happened, like how would I have reacted to the thing of putting a drawing out there, to the great unknown,
Right.
and because it's very interesting, I mean, I'm sure the community was probably pretty supportive as a general.
Yeah. That's one of the rules. Definitely, it was don't we're not soliciting criticism or
Right.
critique when we're posting these. So that's pretty much like an unspoken rule that people don't just critique things willy-nilly, because it
Right.
could be like a little bit of a free-for-all once that happens.
I'm sure.
Feels get hurt. So
Yeah, I've been on Twitter. I know what you're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah, exactly. I mean, even on Twitter, you don't just critique people.
No,
People
it's
are,
no, but you're right. Like it's an interesting phenomenon when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like
right.
that. Like everyone bashes Twitter, and and I'm sure there's some really just dreadful behavior that happens on there. But but I don't think I've ever seen anyone put something up and go like, that's okay, but like like yeah, I don't yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know, except for artist extraordinaire Dave Johnson, who openly will go after.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, he's the one that would do it. Absolutely.
No, Dave, totally. I mean, Dave and I we were studio mates for a while, and roommates, and man, like even if you would just be like, you'd be like, well, hey man, I don't know, and he would just start like talking about whatever you were doing. You're like, dude, I just got to get this done. Like, let's not get too crazy about this. So, but he's just like, I mean, he's just got like an eye, and a willingness, like,
Oh my
and
gosh.
honestly,
I
he's
wish he continued that thing,
well, didn't he put up a post not too long ago saying that he was
did he?
thinking of bringing back his cover
Oh,
critique?
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to see.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I fervently read those things because I mean, and Dave's not wrong. He's
No,
rarely wrong. I mean,
absolutely.
he's really one of the sharpest eyes in the world. But and I don't know. Maybe I'll ask him, but like rarely, like I don't know if he got the inspiration. So back in the day, so 1990, 91.
Mhm.
So the ever wonderful Michael Golden was an editor at DC Comic Books. What the fuck am I saying? So he was the editor there, and I think he was like the cover editor. I don't know what the title
Right.
title was. I mean, like they just basically wanted to have him there. We've
Mhm.
got him, and they would send around covers like for editorial, I don't know, feedback. I don't know. Like
Right.
so basically like an
But he was the
envelope.
art director for those
Yeah, but he
covers.
wasn't the art director. This would
Yeah.
go to, but I mean, it went to everybody's office. Like
Okay.
every editor got this one document that would go around,
Mhm.
and like I mean, so Michael, he showed me one once, like and he just basically drew a fish and stinky lines above it
Nice.
for the editorial comment, and
Uh-huh.
while I think predominantly the responses were looks great,
Yeah.
like wish Batman was bigger, from the Batman office,
Uh-huh.
whatever the sort of the responses were. And like Michael like did that, and like that, I think that whole sort of thing kind of stopped. So I don't know if that might have been like legend and lore that led Dave to like, want to like change the comic book industry with his opinion. So I mean, whatever, man. Dave is his own kind of genius, and
Right.
we're better off for having him in the world.
I just love that he threw that rock into that pond and
Oh
just
yeah,
watched the splash go everywhere. Didn't
he,
matter.
he doesn't care. What does
Yeah,
he?
it doesn't matter where he hits.
It doesn't. It's whatever,
Yeah.
And he's and good on him. Thumbs up. So, but so I mean, but it's interesting. You were able to use the message board as an opportunity for you to kind of gauge where your work, at what level your work sort of stood.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because like when I was growing up, I didn't really have anybody else. Like none of my friends drew.
Mm,
I was the only one that was like really into comics and drew a lot and all and that stuff. So
yeah.
it's not like I can show it to anybody and then have any kind of meaningful feedback. Like you
Huh.
show it to your parents and they say it looks amazing. Like
Sure.
they
Like,
will they will
frick it.
right, exactly. They would
Well,
love it no matter what. But so you don't really have anybody who can say, you know what, this works, this doesn't. You should look at these people. You
mhm.
know, this kind of inspiration that would work for you, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It took until I got online and on those message boards with actual professionals that do the job and know what they're talking about to develop.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's so, I mean, I think the thing is like, I think the beauty of what the internet is supposed to be is that,
Mm,
it's this open interchange of growth.
right.
And unfortunately that can get co-opted into the, into sort of unhealthy sort of expressions. But
Yeah.
but the fact that you were sort of the beneficiary of that sort of altruistic aspect of the internet, that's super amazing. So did you, I mean, do you feel that bolstered inside you what you needed to say, okay, I'm going to put this down on paper and then physically show it to somebody, like at more work at a show or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what gave me the confidence to
Wow.
say, I actually can do this, at some level or so.
So what were you, I mean, so what were you doing outside, like, so what were you doing before you were doing comic books? Were you doing things in the creative field, or were you
No, not really. I mean,
just,
I
just
don't have the confidence
you were
to
hitman?
make that my job.
Right.
I was, just working a regular 9 to 5 kind of job.
Okay. Wow. Okay, cool. Well, no, I guess that makes sense. I mean, if you were working to build sort of the chops and the confidence to do the thing for comic books,
Mhm.
it would stand to reason. But then again, listen, the skill set it takes to draw comics is incredibly high. Like
Right.
the competence to be able to draw a character on model for an entire issue, to be able to draw items at any angle,
Mhm.
to visually tell a story, like all these things are like, each one in its own right is a skill set that you can make a living off of.
Yeah.
Putting them all together is a skill set that you can barely make a living off of.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's totally true. And the thing is, like, I mean, I'm definitely in that mindset because I was ingrained in me. You know what? You have to have this kind of skill sets to make it in comics.
Yeah.
But I think that was a mistake because I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have started a lot sooner. Like I would have started a lot younger
Yeah.
when I didn't have, a house, a family, a job.
Right.
When I would work living with my parents,
And
not
enemies.
doing
Before you
anything,
had enemies, Ron.
Exactly, yeah. Because you don't really, in order to make a good comic, you don't really need, I mean, it's good to have chops, but
Yes.
to actually make a good comic, you just have to have something to say,
Mhm.
um, and just say it.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I think I would do if I had to do it all over again. I would just start a lot earlier.
Yeah, I think the desire to do it is the like, I mean, in like, I was thinking about this earlier today, like the three things that make success. So like there is skill. I'm not going to call talent, because skill is something you can build on. Talent is something that's supposed to be just sort of innate. So let's just call it skill. There's skill, then there's opportunity, and then there's drive.
Right.
And like those three things, like that Venn diagram creates that success
Mhm.
overlap. Like if you can get those three things working in harmony. But I'll tell you, the drive is the number one thing.
Right.
Like, because
Absolutely.
opportunity is the thing that somebody else gives you,
Mhm.
and and skill is the thing that comes over time. But the thing that you have stepping right out the door is drive.
Right.
And and like, talking to people like Dan Ocean, like Dan was doing comic books when he was 14 years old.
Exactly.
you know
He's ridiculous, that
yeah,
guy.
I mean, in between his time with as a boy band lead frontman, like he was doing comic books. And
Mhm.
like that's a huge thing of drive. That's somebody who's saying, like, this is what I want to do. Like he
Right.
wasn't even it was 2 years out of the 12-year mark.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
was 12 years old, going like, I figured it out.
I
Now I
know.
just need to spend 2 years and get my career going. Like that's how he went. But
Mhm.
so like it's that kind of thing. So when you say like, oh, start earlier, yes,
Right.
absolutely. Like and I think like, oh man, yeah, it would have been really interesting to see had I just been just like cranking things out like when I was 16 years old.
Mhm.
It was a different market then, of course. Like not what it is now. But like, if you're 16 years old and you want to do comic books, do comic books.
Right.
Like, they're there.
That's
It,
the
it-
best way because, like, you don't have any responsibilities.
yeah,
You just have school, and your parents provide everything else for you. You have
sure.
so much free time.
Yeah,
Uh, if you want to make comics, just do it. Um,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, less video games, more comics. There you
Right,
go.
exactly.
There's
And
just
plus, you don't have that filter where you're like looking at something, and they're like looking at it and thinking it sucks. The filter isn't that.
no, it's not, because you think it's really good. Like
Yeah.
when I was 16, I went to DC Comics. Like a friend of a friend kind of thing got me a meeting there with a wonderful person. And I went there thinking, this is it. I'm off to be a comic book artist, like, I
Right.
mean, that's what I thought was going to happen, because is basically, if you can figure out the secret, where the door is to get into the building, you're in the business. Like
Right.
that's as far as I knew the vetting process to exist,
Mhm.
So, and he was incredibly kind and, and generously, dropping me off of my high horse at at that time. But like, it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, okay. But like, but in this day and age, like, that 16-year-old kid be like, oh, I've been doing a comic book for 2 years,
Exactly.
got
Yeah.
a Patreon, and and I make $72 a month from it, and like, that's great, good
Yeah.
for you, like, I wasn't
Great,
making $72 a month doing comics then.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's fantastic. So how, like, were there people who were influential outside of that message board, like in the real world, like that you met, who were
Like,
supportive?
not. I mean, pretty much just people. I mean, when I would see people in conventions,
Yeah,
I saw Mike Oming at a convention, and he's really helpful. He's really good.
he's a really
Uh,
nice guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Oming. And I'm a big Steve Rude fan. And I always show my stuff to him when I see him.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's, when he has good words for me, that's something I would carry for years. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We had our it's so happened that my wife and I both shared a studio, not the same studio space. We were in the same floor of a building, and it was below a comic book store. And the comic shop put on the local comic convention, and Steve was like the guest, the main guest for the show. And he likes to do painting tutorials. So he rented out her studio for a week doing painting tutorials.
That's awesome.
So I have a painting of my wife by Steve Rude.
That's amazing. That's great.
I know. Total bonus.
Yeah. Yeah. He went to, there was one time where he went to a local comic store when I was living in Florida. He went to a comic store there, and he was doing a demonstration, an art demonstration. He did a big drawing of Superman, and I still have the drawing of Superman that he did. It's pretty huge. I can't frame it, so it's just rolled up, and I wish I could frame it because it's so good. But I just love his work.
Oh yeah, I mean he's a whole special kind of magic. There's this, I don't know. I mean, he's the classic illustrator and Jack Kirby rolled up together into kind of one thing that we're fortunate to get that in comics. What's your favorite work by Steve Rude? Quick.
It has to be World's Finest. I think that's the better one. Yeah.
I think World's Finest. I mean, Nexus is the easy call because you can just say that that's a whole bunch of junk. But
right.
Yeah, that World's Finest is just such a magical work.
Absolutely. I think he was really inspired because he really put everything he had into that story, and he was really inspired by his love of the old classic serials of Superman and all of that. So the whole Fleischer thing. Absolutely, yeah. So I think it's his best work.
It's I mean it's really it's interesting when we get when the sort of, I don't know, there's this caliber of comic book artists like a Steve Rude or a Paul Smith when they get on these projects, so that World's Finest thing, like Steve goes boom, knocks it out of the park. Paul Smith gets on the Golden Age thing and just boom, knocks it out of the park. Like they're really these exceptional things where they get to kind of, I don't know, just like play with the like somebody brings out the original version of the toy. Like, hey, would you like to play with the original version? You're like, yes, I would. So,
yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, I mean, Steve's he's quite an amazing person, and just incredibly knowledgeable about
Mhm.
the craft.
Right.
What were the things that you first kind of like felt like, oh, okay, I'm doing this, like when it came to work for you?
When it comes to comics or just
Yeah,
art in general?
no. When it comes to comics,
Um, like the first things I did in comics,
yeah. I
or
mean, like, yeah, because I mean, was your first work for a publisher, or was it for an independent thing? Like, what was the
yeah,
first? Okay,
yeah. The first work I did was, I think it was in Pop Gun, which was an anthology that Image brought out. Um,
yeah,
that was, I think, 2008 or 2009.
it's a cool
I don't
logo.
know. Yeah, because back then we had, the Flight anthology series, and they tried to bring that up, and make their own version. And then after that, I did a comic series with Nick Spencer, called
Okay,
Existence 2.0, that went out through Image, and then Existence 3.0 came out as well through Image. And then after that, I did a few things like Dark Horse. I did a Spider-Man annual. I don't remember, but a bunch of other things. Oh, I also did. I did a series of covers, for Dracula, Company of Monsters for Boom.
okay.
Um, and then before that, I did a 28 Days Later issue, which Declan Shalvey was kind enough to recommend me to do it.
Is
So I did.
it? You know, I really think Declan might be the person who is so responsible for so many people. You
Absolutely,
know,
I think so.
he's he is like the quintessential sort of rising tide sort of approach to the industry. He
Right. I think,
yeah
yeah, he's very generous with, like, recommending people to, do some work.
yeah
And I really appreciate that about him.
yeah and it's yeah, I mean it's yeah it's I wouldn't say that like most people aren't like that, but I think he goes out of his what I feel is he goes out of his way to give, and
Yes.
it's not a detriment to him. I think he really is that he obviously is a person of the philosophy, the more you give, the more you get. So
Right.
well, so that's really cool to hear. Yes, I mean, yeah, Deck is just he's just such a sweet guy, such a good
Hmm.
guy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I got a couple of things here that I pulled from your website. Oh yeah, look at I forgot to put this up. So go to Ron's website. Um, that's a ringing endorsement right there. Um, so Prince Valiant,
Mhm.
how did this come about for you?
Um, the editor, Nate, actually asked me to do it. That's pretty much how it is, and he knew I was a big fan of the original Prince Valiant, and my art is very. It's kind of, it has a dated kind of look, so maybe that fits, Prince Valiant.
Okay,
That's why he
let's
recommended
call
me.
it
But
classic, Ron. Let's call it a classic look, not dated.
I guess, yeah. I mean, you could say that charitably. Um, but yeah, so that's how I got to do it.
Okay, yeah, going through the pages, I mean, they're really cool because I mean, like like we all have the sort of the vision of Hal Foster, right? Like that look
Yeah.
is sort of endemic with this thing, but I like how you didn't sort of like clearly it wasn't this effort to say like, well, let's just find an artist who can draw like Hal Foster and try to make a like like I mean, did you ever get to look at that like stuff? Were you looking at that when you were growing up, like the Prince Valiant in the newspaper?
No, we had, because in the Philippines, Hal Foster is pretty big. There were a bunch of artists. I mean, the classic illustrators were pretty big, like Hal Foster, Bern Hogarth. All of those guys are pretty
Yeah.
big back there. So a lot of the art that came out of the Philippines are, influenced by that. So there was a guy, called Hal Santiago, and he
Okay.
named himself after Hal Foster, Hal Santiago. And he was a big Hal Foster devotee. And that's who I grew up, idolizing when I was growing
Oh,
up.
really?
And
Okay.
it was only until, it was only until way later when I moved to the US that I got to see actual Hal Foster work. And, I was old enough to appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't have back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it was every Sunday the Prince Valiant was in the newspaper, so like it would it was there, so you would grab the comic book section or comic strip section and thumb through it, and then you would see, because they were bigger. Like he still
Mhm.
had like it still had the clout in the comic section to be like not just a strip, it was a block. So they would be
Right.
able to have like stacked panels in one big panel or something like that. And it was just this magical, because it's the only thing that felt more like comic books that was in the Sundays. So you would
Mhm.
get to see this kind of like this big, and they were all kind of like very beautifully colored. Like they were really impressive,
They're
compared to.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
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 I
I mean,
tried my best to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. I'm sorry. I scratched my nail. Sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, I tried my best to kind of, recapture, like capture in my way, Hal Foster, but I just, I don't have the ability. I don't have the time to do it. He had, one whole week
No one does.
to do that one page. And
Yeah.
I just didn't have the time. But I wish, I would have done a better job at it.
I don't know.
I love it.
I think it's beautiful, man. I mean, I go like you. I mean, I love that you like, because like doing a book like that. Here are the things that you have to do that most artists don't want to have to do. You got to draw a lot of natural stuff. You got to draw animals. Like these are the things like most artists go like, oh no. Let me is it like the worst thing you can say, like, hey, I need you to draw a horse riding a motorcycle through the countryside. Like that would be the worst thing for a comic book artist to do.
Right.
But like, but how you incorporated the natural stuff. Like, go to Ron's website. He has like a bunch of these pages up there, and they're really beautiful to look through. So, and yeah, I mean, they're good. I love them. So
Thank
I
you.
think you did great, man. I think you did great. Now, I mean, are you drawing digitally? Are you drawing traditionally? Like,
Now I'm mostly drawing digitally.
okay,
Those Prince Valiant stuff, they were all traditional.
okay,
But now everybody says that it's a lot faster to draw digitally, and I don't think that's true necessarily. It's just you can be a lot more precise and actually have the work that you want out there
yeah,
digital, because when you put the line down on an actual piece of paper, you're stuck with it. You can
yeah,
put white out and stuff, but it's not the same. Digitally, you can tweak it as many times as you want until
forever,
you get. Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah.
I that's why I draw digitally. I just can't be happy with what I have.
No,
That's
I no, I was sitting yesterday and thinking, and I was looking at my Wacom tablet, and I go, wow, I'm like, if I was drawing comic books, would I draw like maybe I fantasize about the idea of like, I'm like, if I had the if money was no object and I could sit and draw a comic book, without having to worry about like paying the bills or whatever, um, I'm like, would I draw it, digitally, or would I draw it on paper? And there's a big chunk of me that says like, I think I might do it on paper, even though
right.
I've been working digitally for, I don't know, 14-ish years, but it was just one of those things where I thought like, well, I don't know. I don't know. It's maybe because I consider it more art at this point, because it would be an art project versus being a product project.
Right.
I don't know. It's an interesting. So when did you switch? When did you make the switch?
The Switch, I think, it was a couple of years ago, because I did the first comic that I did digitally, all digitally, was $6 Million Man.
What,
We
this
did that
one?
series. Yeah. So that's I did all of that digitally.
Okay.
Uh, just because it was a lot easier. And I think I can do a lot more things digitally versus traditionally. So I think it turned out a lot better.
So that was a shift. I mean, that was like, okay, I'm going to the store. I'm going to buy a Cintiq and start going, or what was it like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I went and bought a Cintiq companion.
Yeah.
And that way I can just work wherever. So I would take it anywhere. I had a day job, so I would just, I would work after work, and when I was at work, I would take, I would have that and draw during the lunch hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, you know, that's how I work. So those pages are all digital, and it was something where I had to really make sure that I wanted to do, because you don't sell these pages, so you don't have anything to sell afterwards.
This is this is the huge debate, right?
Mhm.
It is the huge debate of the day. I had here's my internet altruism thing for years. I kept thinking like, it would be so great if you could create like a digital file that was a unique file that you could then sell to somebody as a digital, like, hey, here's a commission, here's the art, you can
Right.
get the thing, like, aside from
Yeah.
like tearing your computer out of its cubby and shipping the computer to the person saying, there it is, you've got the file. Like,
Mhm.
I kept, that was like, I'm like, this would be a great way that people could sell their digital artwork to other people,
Right.
and that would be a way to do it. And then NFTs are created, and like, and they're either evil or the next coming. I don't know whichever side you stand on the fence, but
Yeah.
it's not exactly the solution I had envisioned. I envisioned it not being something controlled by other people, but something that was just an exchange between two individuals. But
And some
maybe,
people, like, make like limited edition prints of pages. I've
yeah,
seen some people do that, like David Marquez, I think, did that, and a few other, but it hasn't been really big. Big.
something will happen. Somebody will figure
Right.
something out that like someone's going to try something and everyone's going to be like, and then like a year later, a couple more people will do it, and then like 2 years later, everyone will be doing it. So
Absolutely. There's like a breaking point probably at some point in the future. Just like
yeah,
when Kickstarter suddenly
sure,
happened and people are
right,
doing Kickstarters.
right,
That kind
aka tin cup. That's what I kept calling it. Like when it first started, I'm like, what are you begging?
exactly. Yeah.
Just get a job,
Yeah.
and like, like, because you don't know until you
Mhm.
realize like, oh, what this can do, or it's like the
Right.
conventions, like everyone's got their little stand-up artwork thing behind them with their name
Mhm.
on it. Like nobody had that. And then
Right.
like after the first person who had that, everybody was looking like, desperate enough,
Yeah, exactly.
and then the 2 years later, everyone's got one,
Right.
So it's just one of those kind of things. Someone
Mhm.
will come up with the right answer, and we'll and everyone will fall in line, and then a broader audience will be able to reap the benefits of it, in the sense
Right.
of having that sort of limited edition, like, I don't know, unique code. I don't know what it's
Mhm.
going to be that gets printed onto the thing, and then people have, hey, this is it. This is the
Yeah.
nice thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
That's
listen,
sometime in the future. Definitely. It's something.
something.
Yeah,
But
but
if
no, when I was
anybody's
doing that book, it was something that I really had to think about, because I mean, they bring in some income,
they
definitely.
do,
And I had to make a choice between, having that income or being happy with how the book looked. And I
sure,
had to choose. I'd rather not be embarrassed by how this book looks. So I'll do
right.
it digitally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough aspect, because there is this sort of kind of like, I don't know. I mean, there's a passive income with all this artwork that you do.
Mhm.
You're like, you have it. I have not been in the comic book game drawing comics in 2 decades now, and I did a free comic book day thing. The comic shop that I spoke of earlier asked me, hey, would you sit and draw? I'm like, sure.
Mhm.
And I think I had my pages there. I think I did, because somebody like went through them and goes, are you selling these? And I'm like, no one's asked me that question in 20 years. Like, I didn't even have an answer for the guy, because I'm
Right.
just like, because
Yes.
I was so far out of like my world at that point.
Mhm.
So I think I said no. I don't remember.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. Whatever, man. So I mean, so that's, but it's an interesting thing, like to shift from a traditional working method to a digital method. There's a whole bunch of, because there's a bunch of relearning you have to do. Like,
Right.
There's different ways of thinking how you approach a page. Do you use, are you just using Photoshop, or are you using like Clip Studio, or like what's your?
Yeah, now I use pretty much always Clip Studio.
It's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just the way it draws that line. It captures what I want it to do. Whereas
Yeah.
in Photoshop, there's a lot of wiggle that's still in there.
Yep.
It might be that I did that, myself, like my hand wiggled when I was
Yeah.
drawing the line, but I don't want to see that in there. So that's why I use Clip Studio. It's a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I love me my Photoshop. I love me my Adobe products. They put the food on the table for me, but Clip is a purpose-built tool to make comic books, and damn if it doesn't do it really, really well.
Right.
Although I gotta say, I'm really, really super intrigued and fascinated by this whole iPad Pro world of making comic books on a tablet like that.
Right.
There's something super, super, like, I don't know.
No, I mean, it's got to be good. Like to just go and take your work anywhere. That's why I brought the Cintiq Companion, because it's a portable device. Right now, I don't have that. I have the monitor, and I'm stuck here. I have to make the comics when I'm sitting
at work.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't go to the library and just work.
Wheeling in a giant road case with your 22-inch monitor and hold on, let me just set this up over here so I can work for a while. Yeah. No, it's, I mean, it's funny because before they started making the sort of the smaller Cintiq models, like at ad agencies, like these guys would roll in with these big Pelican cases to do storyboard artwork, like on a Cintiq in studio for ad agencies. It was just, you'd sit there and like you'd be hanging out and waiting, and like there would just be this guy sitting there with these giant cases, and you go, wow, like you're like holding a pencil, going like,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So like they'll give me paper, like there's paper in that copy machine. I just need the pencil. That's it.
Yeah,
so, but
I mean that's what's great about the Cintiq Companion, because like for example, like that's $6 Million Man series that I did everything pretty much. Like I worked at home sometimes, but most of the time I was at a Starbucks doing that. So it was great for that. I love working wherever I was at, and that's why I bought the Cintiq Companion. But it was a flawed device, ultimately.
I mean, it was. I think it was ahead of its time as far as what they wanted it to do. Whereas I think the iPad Pro is such a solid piece of software and hardware all in one thing that it's up to the software writers, or I should say operating system and hardware. And now it's up to the people who create the apps to screw it up. Because
I'm very interested in that. Yeah, definitely.
I know, and more people I talk to are really doing their comic books in that route. And it's like, because like years ago, Golden and I were talking. He's like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna do everything digitally. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm just
really?
like, really. And then like a few years ago, he was just like, I mean, it might have been even last year. He was like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna do the whole thing on the iPads, like on an iPad with Procreate. I think it was Procreate at the time. And I was like, oh, Jesus, but he was having certain specific printing issues. And I'm really just, I'm paraphrasing the story and ruining it. So everybody who holds me to this screw you. But the thing is that like, it's such a wrong way of saying it, but the two of us are very much rooted in print, in the terms of traditional print and how print operates, that when we're using programs like Photoshop, which is traditional in its approach to print, that we're setting up files thinking that this is going to be printed offset.
Mm.
There's 4 colors on 4
Mhm.
different stations and paper passing underneath, and like these
Right.
stations are like, but that's not how Procreate. I don't think that's how Procreate operates, and I
Okay.
think it's a very different type of approach. So
Mm.
he was having problems getting the effects for colors that he really wanted to have.
Okay.
And he's very specific about his coloring, and
Mm.
and so so I don't I have no idea if he's still utilizing those devices or not. So
Mhm.
um, who knows?
I think
But
Clip Studio works on the
it does.
iPad as well. Yeah. So
It does.
yeah.
I mean, I every so often, like I just go, okay, well, like everything's good work wise. I would love to get an ad agency just to ring me up and say, hey, we need to have a whole bunch of these, these things done for next week. Because I
Hmm.
would just love to do that to say, cool, thank you for buying me a brand new iPad. You know what I mean? Like that, because I would
Yeah.
just do that. I would say, yeah, fine, I'll give up a weekend just to be able to buy that product and
Mhm.
then just have fun with it. And like, I'm not even
Right.
making comic books. Like,
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. I would spend the money just so I could test it out.
Hmm. Yeah. I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, it would be good to test out. I don't know if it's still the same, but I remember somebody doing color tests with Clip Studio on the iPad once, and it wasn't really accurate,
Right.
compared to Photoshop. So I
Yep.
don't know if that's changed since then. There's been a couple of updates since then, but that would be a good, just something that would be good to use, I think.
Yeah, and I just, because I mean, I also, I mean, I'm not being completely naive. I'm like, I could probably use this for work, like,
Right.
real work. But I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So, do you do anything in the traditional using the traditional tools anymore, or are you just completely in the digital environment?
No, I mean, I still do commissions
Okay,
every so often. Like been working on commissions this whole week.
right.
And it's nice to,
Oh yeah, you've been posting. I think you been posting some of your commissions pieces that
yeah,
you.
I've been, posting some commissions
Yeah,
here and there. So I still do that. And it's nice to have, like, use the traditional tools,
yeah,
because there's some things that I can do with that I still can't do digitally. Like dry
right.
brush, I still can't do digitally. No matter how much I try, it still doesn't turn out the same way that I want it to. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, I still do that. It's fun, and just the tactile feeling of pen or brush on paper.
yep.
You can't really capture that. Like, the slickness of the screen is sometimes a barrier to
Yeah.
the art. So
That's hopping back to the iPad. I think everyone has said like there's a specific like cover thing that you need to get for
yeah,
it.
it's get the Papermate cover
Yeah, right.
that they have for the iPad. I wish they had something big for a monitor
I'm
sized
surprised.
Papermate.
I'm
Yeah,
surprised that no one's made that.
yeah. I mean, that would be great.
I mean, even if they made like an oversized piece that you could
Mhm.
cut to size,
Yeah,
for all the variety of different, tablets out there, that would be really super beneficial.
yeah.
Somebody get on that. Somebody make that happen. Don't, but
That would be great.
give me and Ron money for that. That's what we want. Um, yeah, that's awesome. So I'm looking at your well organized bookshelf right there. What do you like? Do you keep book like I know that I always keep books like in arm's reach that I like that are
Mhm.
like my inspiration books, my come on you could do better books, my
Yeah,
reference books, like whatever they
these are
are.
all my "Come on, you can do better" books.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Okay,
everything.
that's cool.
Come on, you can do better. But yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Like all of this. This is my office. So
yeah,
all of these, I have the art books like the Kobe Whitmore, Al Parker, those books. I have like Dark Knight Returns, Hellboy,
yeah.
the Daredevil Born Again. I have that. Everything's. I mean, I have too many books that I haven't read. Um,
It's so God,
I just
born.
look at the pictures mostly.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
like, did you read that book? No, but I've looked at all the pictures.
I've looked at
It's
all the
good.
pictures so many times. I'm pretty sure I know what's
Exactly.
all about. I'm
Someday
gonna
I'll
guess
read them. Yeah.
97% sure I know what's happening in this story.
Exactly. Yeah.
That would be the ultimate great trick of like it would be sounds like an Alan Moore move, like to write out a whole comic book script to have an
Mhm.
artist draw it, but then have written out a completely separate script
Right.
that totally tells a different story, but
Right.
that's all within the narrative and the word balloons, but
Mhm.
not in the actual artwork. So they're like just basically to make it a greater story for the people who actually read comics versus the
Absolutely.
noodleheads like us who just look
Yeah.
at the pictures.
I mean, that'd be great if somebody could actually do that with like an older comic, like say
Oh yeah, rescript
Dark
it.
Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Just take out all the word balloons in there, just to write a totally different story
Like,
for that.
where do you what do you
Well,
mean? What do you mean they didn't have any hamburgers? I
right?
said they're open 24 hours a day. They should always have hamburgers, and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Just don't, and bring me a strawberry shake, that kind of just random language.
exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. So, um, so when did you get into doing color work? Like,
Um,
was that part and parcel like early for you? Like, were you like taking on things to make sure that you could get the covers, or what was the?
no, I mean, I went into it like I've always wanted to do colors,
Yeah,
but I can't do it traditionally.
right.
And it was only when I got into digital that I, started going into colors.
Yeah,
Um, but so I got into Photoshop, um, and just fiddling around with it, and then I got a job at a at a studio that created artwork for like Hard Rock Cafe, Planet Hollywood,
oh,
Disney,
cool.
those kind of places where you have to make full color artwork. So I was doing that every day anyway, and that was considered my practice to doing colors, and that's
Yeah,
how I
paid to
started
practice.
to. Exactly, yeah, exactly. I
Oh,
mean, the
cool.
actual work was the practice,
Yeah.
and it went to this work, which wasn't actually work. Um, it just my whole way has been ass backwards this whole entire time. So
I
that's how I got into colors.
Oh, yeah, but the thing is like if you can get someone to pay you money
Mhm.
to learn something,
Yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
that's the smartest thing to do, and whatever
Mhm.
it is, and I mean, I don't even know. Like, it's interesting you were saying like how doing digitally makes things easier, but like, what it doesn't make easier, it doesn't make it easier for um, a young person to become an assistant in the studio.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I made a joke with somebody last week. Oh no, it was with Mark Lamming, who was like
Mhm.
putting up pages or something, and we're and I don't know, like every so often the friends will start busting on him, and I was like, so what, do you hire an assistant to fill in your blacks now? And he's doing everything in the digital,
Right.
that would be the hilarious thing, is to hire someone just to click in the spot.
Exactly. Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I mean, that
there
would be nice if we had like a manga system where, you had a storyboard, the main creator did the
Yeah,
storyboards, and you have all these assistants doing the actual work. Um,
I mean, yeah, I'm surprised that no one's tried that.
mhm.
Like it surprises me that there hasn't been sort of like, I mean, do you think it's just the sort of the cowboy mentality of America, like where everybody's like, like, hey, I'm the guy who's on the white horse running around
Mhm.
doing pew stuff.
I think it's possibly that, or just one. It's the sense of authorship, I think,
Yeah,
in America that that's why you really wanted. That's why, because there's not a lot of money in comic books. I mean, aside from the people who really make it really big,
right.
there's not a lot of money. But what you're into comic books for is that sense of authorship. You made everything yourself. This is what you wanted to produce,
Yeah,
and I think um, that's why you do it.
because manga is sort of like the structure of manga is similar to, like, you would say, like a restaurant where you
Hmm.
have the chef who creates the whole thing, who is the sort of the star of the show, and then there's all these sous chefs and chef de whatever and the chef de whatever and the pastry chef, and they're all there to execute
Hmm.
that wonderful vision of whatever the thing is, which is that is the person who is in the manga, whose name's on the cover of the book, and then
Right, those
everybody else is there.
unnamed assistants. Yeah.
Right. And while the American comic book industry isn't like a French restaurant, it's like a rock band. And
Right.
it's basically, there's a manager, the editor, who sticks together a singer, guitar player, a bass player, and a drummer, and goes, okay, you guys make the album or the comic in this sense. And then you have people reading the comics trying to decide who's the front man. Is it the guitarist or is it the singer? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Because what is the artist in comics? Are they the guitar player or are they the singer? Like, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of tough that way. I mean, credit in comics is a thorny issue,
Yeah.
anyways. So because so much of it, affects future work, or the monies you get from actual work. So
Yep.
everybody should be credited, and though how much credit you deserve for any particular work, it's kind of tough because ultimately it's a collaborative process.
Yes.
Everybody comes together to do the work, and if you change one piece of whatever it is, it makes a huge difference. I don't know about inkers though. I mean, inkers, you can
Whoa,
you can
nice.
change.
Let's get at the inkers. I'm just
These
kidding.
days, yeah. No, but I mean, like like you have everybody, especially the colorists. Like if you switch out the colorists, that makes such a huge difference to the actual look of a book.
Huge
Yeah.
difference. And the colorist isn't the same person the colorist was 20 years ago.
No.
It's a very different role in the storytelling process. I mean, they've kind of become the cinematographer and lighting designer all in one shot.
Right.
Yeah, they're doing some heavy lifting on comics. So it's an interesting thing. And then and then you get like some amazing letterers like Clayton Cowles, who's just honestly, I think like I can pick his books out in a mile. Like, oh, yep, because you could just feel that sort of tension that he's putting into the comic. So, I mean, listen, if the script isn't perfect, it's your job to make it perfect as the artist. So you just go, okay, well, I can solve this storytelling issue here. That's and you just do it. You just make sure that the story is being told the best way possible, and you move through it. And you don't go running around going like, I need more money or attention because I changed this, like it's just, you do it because, ultimately the job is to get the thing done on time.
Right.
That's
it's just, I do understand like, the problems with regards to credit, because general public, when every comic book comes out, all they see is this comic by certain writer.
For sure.
And the artist is interchangeable, which in some cases are, when it comes to like Marvel or DC, because they switch artists around so much. So it's not like, people don't see that the artist has the same sense of authorship as the writers do, because the writer stays there for such a long period of time. So
it's interesting because, I get that. And I feel that, like, I think from the most part, it has been that way. But but it's funny how, like, having been the kid who was reading comic books at the pictures, not the words, the comic books that I really resonated with were the ones where the artists were so heavily a part of what that book was and in its legacy, that when you look at the John Byrne X-Men or the the George Perez work, on any of the George Perez work, all these, Bill Sienkiewicz on Moon Knight, like, Frank Miller on Daredevil, like I know he wrote it, yes, but the point being is, like, these people, their artwork was the visual brand of these comic books that we as or at least me as the reader, I go, oh, this is the guy. That's the whole thing. So I remember being like, why does the writer get the first credit? And I'm not knocking it, because I get it. I understand how the value, that's where the story came from. Like, it's the idea of the story. Like, we got to, that's where it all comes from. Otherwise, it's just somebody drawing pictures. We need to have a story. So, I don't know. I mean,
because Stan Lee said this is written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby. Even though Jack Kirby came up with a story, brought it to Stan Lee, he scripted the story, but it was also Jack. That's total aside. But I mean, I don't know why I even brought that up, but the credit right now, I think definitely everybody should be credited, and everybody should be given credit for the product that they produce.
Yeah,
So if somebody is given um, disproportionate amount of credit for any kind of thing,
sure.
is kind of bad. I don't think that works. But it's very complicated. It's a very complicated issue.
Well, I mean, because I mean, I think as you said earlier, listen, it's a collaborative process, and as great as whatever each individual's effort is into it, it is one entire product altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't sort of split them apart,
Right.
In that respect. And like, you know, I was fortunate enough to work with like who I felt was one of my favorite writers and comic book creators, which was Keith Giffen at the time. And like, I love Keith Giffen comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a part in the story that he had characters sitting in a car talking to one another, you know, exciting comic book stuff. And so I had to tell the story and not make it completely boring, and not saying that Keith wrote a boring thing at all. It's just that like it was necessary part of the narrative of the tale.
Right.
But I so I gave one of the characters an action, and I've said this before. I had her take her scrunchie out of her hair, redo her ponytail, and put the scrunchie in while I had the camera moving around while they were talking and telling and the story is moving along. And then the next issue or two later, in the letters column, someone writes and says specifically, "I loved that little touch. Great job, Keith." You know, so you know, and, so like, and it's like I get it, you know, but like that was me solving that visual problem of how do we tell this story so the reader doesn't get bored, and entice them to read those little white bubbles, you know, like, because I, being that sensitive reader who would like to look at the pictures versus read the letters or the words, you know, we're the people who have to make the story kind of interesting for people. So
they don't know what goes into making the comic. So when you did that scrunchie, they think, you know what, Keith told you to do that.
Sure.
And you just do it because that's what you're supposed to do. Like you're just a puppet, you know.
Right. And now, you know, nearly 30 years later, you know, coming up on 30 years later, you know, I'm sure possibly he might have thought he wrote that. You know what I mean? Like, because it's just that sort of like, no, I came up with this line in that song. You know what I mean? Who knows? Right. You know, like, but it's just one of those things, you know, like but it you know, but we can't have end credits for comic books saying
exactly
page 40 blah 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 blah, blah. You know, the colorist chose green, you know, like, I mean, like, we just don't get to do that kind of stuff. So
there's got to be a way where everybody can have the appropriate amount of credit. And I don't know when that will happen. Maybe when they enable people to purchase digital work sometime in the future, that kind of thing. But hopefully somebody will figure out, some smart person will figure that out.
That's what we're here for, is to wait for the smart people to do the things that we need.
Exactly.
Right? That seems to be our purpose in life. So what I mean, you're going to be at Heroes Con. So that's pretty exciting. So we should be able to meet in person then. So
that'd be awesome.
Everything works out well. And a whole bunch of I hope I get to go, because I'm really excited, because there's so many people I haven't seen in a long time.
Do you usually go to Heroes Con? Is that one of the
I went to Heroes last 8 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I don't live too far away. You know, I live 2.5 hours, 2 hours away, so it's pretty close. Quick little jog. But what else you got going on, my friend?
I just finished the comic with Declan Shalvey, Rory Conville, Time After Time, Time Before Time.
I just talked to Rory on Monday.
Yeah. So I just did 2 issues. with their on their comic, issues 13 to 14 on
Yep.
that, and it was a great story. That was fun to do. So I think the first issue just came out last week.
It's shoot. Let's see if I still have them. Here
Mhm.
we can. This is happening in real time. Enjoy. Hold on a second. Enjoy this piece of artwork while this other thing happens in real time. Let's see if I can find it here. Here. Ah, so close. And here. Oh wait. Nope. Hold on.
Oh,
Believe me, all this will be smoothed out in post. It's not. None of that will be. None of this will be smoothed out in post. I said 13 to 14. You said right?
mm-hmm. 13 and 14. So I think the third issue 13 just came out last week.
Boom.
Yeah. So that's one of the variant covers for it, and that one
Yep.
is actually the proceeds from that is going towards supporting I think Ukraine, something about Ukraine. I apologize for not knowing exactly what it is, but
Something to help benefit the people in Ukraine.
right, absolutely.
That's
Yeah, that's
yep.
Declan Shalvey's cover. So
Yeah.
that just came out, and then the next one sometime next month.
That's awesome. That's
So I just did
exciting.
that. Yeah, and then I had finished 200 some page biography of Muhammad Ali.
No
So that should be
way.
coming out sometime next year.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Who is that for?
I mean, I wish because something a biography of Muhammad Ali just came out just recently.
Okay.
It was a small one, and I wish I beat them to it, but I was just too slow, so it's not going to come out until next year. So, but
Right. Now, what publisher is that for?
first second.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
they were really great for letting me do because I did like they gave me the latitude to do the art and be comfortable with what I have because I did the art. It's tonal artwork. It's just not in color.
Wow.
Totally, and I also lettered the book, so visually everything that you see will be mine. So if
That's
it looks bad or if it looks good, it's all my fault. And the story was by Mark Bernardin.
so we know. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. The very pleasant Mark Bernardin. So
Yeah,
that's
very
awesome.
prolific. Yeah,
That too.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. So do you know when next year that will be?
I'm not sure. I think first or second quarter of next year, but I don't have an exact date, unfortunately.
Just go to your website or go to your
Once,
Instagram page and wait.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once I find out, I'll definitely blab it to everybody that will
Yeah.
listen.
So follow Ron on Instagram, and then he'll blab it there. Um, that's awesome. That's great. That's exciting. One of my childhood heroes was Muhammad Ali. So like I named my dog after the guy. So I was pretty big into that guy. So that's pretty exciting. So cool. So Heroes Con, are you doing other shows this year? Do you have a
Not really. I mean, usually Heroes is the only one I do because I just love that show. It's a
it's a
great
great
artists
show.
convention.
Yeah.
Um, and the best artists go there. And it's just a very comfortable, it's like a family atmosphere there. So that's why I love going there.
It's
Um,
it's I'm not saying how comic book conventions should be,
mhm.
but it's how comic conventions used to be.
Yeah.
That's my really wildly controversial statement right there. So just gonna stick with that, and that's how I'll leave that. Yeah, that's cool. So, are you reading or watching anything really interesting right now?
um, I mean, I'm reading a few books. Like, I just started reading Descender by Jeff Lemire, Dustin Wen.
Mm-hmm.
Got it from the library. I'd read Tetris by Box Brown. That was really good.
Cool.
Uh, just a few things like here and there, but I'm not really. I'm probably the only one that you wouldn't that you know that would be reading Chinese online web novels. That's what I've been reading most. It's such a trash such a trash kind of piece of media.
Wow.
But I read that Chinese and Korean web novels. I read that a lot.
How is it? So how are they? I mean, like, what's the? So it's a web novel. So I mean, is it released like chapter by chapter? Like,
yeah, mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. Well, in Korea, a lot of the ones I've been reading have already finished. You know, they're just translating it.
Right.
Those are the translations that keep being released daily, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily, sometimes intermittent schedule. It
Yeah.
just depends on
So I'm now I'm completely fascinated. I mean, I don't know how much you know, but I write prose, so I'm
Mhm.
like like here I am asking you questions about the library. Like everyone's like, talk about comic books, you idiot. So I don't care. Damn it, I don't care. No, but so like what is the subject of the like what's the sort of subject matters of these books?
A lot of it's escapist literature.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah, I mean, because there used to be like, I don't know if you've heard of Heavenly Sword and Dragon Saber
yes.
from China. Okay, so those things, they used to be serialized in actual books in magazines back then, and then they would compile them into books, and people would read them and all that stuff.
Okay.
This is kind of like the modern day version of that, where they would just have a serial web novel released online, or they would have an app on their
Yeah.
phone, and they would read it there. It's pretty big actually in China, in Korea. A lot of the new Chinese fantasy TV shows are based on those web novels.
Really?
So
Okay.
yeah,
That
but
is
that's how I got into it, by watching Heavenly Sword and Dragon Saber
right.
and Condor Heroes, those kind of things.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
That's totally rad. Nice. I'm about to start reading Scott McCloud's Sculptor.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not a
I
light, not
haven't
a
read
light
it, but I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, I bought it for my wife as a recommendation from a friend, and she read the whole thing. She goes, "So why did you buy this for me?" And it's like it's really well done, but it's like it's not an uplifting tale. So like she was like, so I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I didn't read the room, but it happens. So I'm excited to read it because it's really great to look at. So I can't wait to read the stories. I will actually read the words, I promise. Yeah, no, it's good. It looks like good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's great to read other people's comics, because
Yeah.
you don't have to critique. I can just enjoy the actual storytelling
Oh, for sure.
and learn stuff from it.
Yeah.
Instead of like saying, "Oh, that looks terrible. It
Yeah.
didn't work," that kind of thing. So yeah.
Do you have any? I mean, do you have any writing stuff that you want
Writing,
to?
I haven't written anything in a long time.
Yeah, I'm saying, but do you have any? I mean, do you have like stories that you might want to be like, hey, I want to write. I want to write my own comic book. Maybe
Yeah,
write.
that's what I'm going to be working on next.
Okay.
Is going to be writing, drawing, lettering, coloring.
So you
The
could do a
whole
Cliff Chang. You're doing
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Chang?
except not as successful, probably.
That is really the ultimate flex.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's like, listen, I know other people have done it, and bravo and props to everyone who's done it,
Right.
but nobody's done it for the majors.
Right. Exactly.
And he's just flexed big. It's just
it's so good. I mean,
it's
just
so
amazing.
good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
But that's something you can say with every kind of Cliff Chang, and everything he creates is
sure.
it's so good. He's just there's nothing that he makes that's actually like that's bad. Like everything is great. So, he's just, I don't know. He just walks on air. I think he's so talented.
He does. I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah. Well, you should get writing, and because I think everybody who makes comic books should make every aspect of comic books, whether it's the ambitious level of doing all of it, like you just stated, or even if it's just saying, hey, I'm going to write a story and someone else is going to draw it. Because just that process of writing it and and then working with somebody else to make sure that it becomes a thing is a skill set that you can kind of like make your better. So
yeah, and that's why I wish I started earlier, because when you're young, you definitely have a lot to say. You don't have the means to say it, but you definitely had a lot to say when you're young. Whereas later on, you have that filter that
Yeah.
kind of eats away at that voice. But hopefully, now I think I do have something to say where
Yeah.
I can actually do that.
Here, the encouraging thing is that using my 12 theory is that you can absolutely tap into all of that at any time. Like you can actually like get into that point where when you felt that little excitement in your belly, when you're like, that's the thing that I love so much.
Yeah.
You can recreate that when you're writing the thing that you love, because then it's still there. It's all there.
It's just buried deep inside.
Yeah, sure.
And you just need to unearth it. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Responsibilities and self-consciousness. It's like it's all in there. But the thing is, we can get past all that, whatever tools we choose to use, whether it's journaling, meditating, talking, drinking, whatever the thing is that people end up doing. But the thing is, they can be tapped into. So like I mean, trust me, and and if you ever have any questions about it, man, I'm always around to talk about it, because I mean it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing to people to get over that. So and since the message boards are gone, you're going to have to find different ways to get that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the offer.
Yeah. Anytime. All right. You good? Was this good?
Yeah.
You all right?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Hey man, it was absolutely my pleasure. Ron, I have to put the official music on. If I don't put the official music on, then the show doesn't end, and then we're stuck here for eternity. So, Ron, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Go find Ron. See, and anybody who says that like I did leave his name. I spelled his name right at the bottom. So just go to ronsalas.com. You can find anything Ron there. Until next time, Ron, I'll see you in Charlotte soon.
Yep. See you there.